Hey guys, Barry McGinnity back for another episode of today's Comeback Game podcast. Today I've got Dave Jenyns, who's an entrepreneur whose journey began back in the early 20s when he sold Australia's most loved sporting ground, the Melbourne Cricket Ground. Since then, his business experience spans from developing branching retail stores to founder of Australia's most trusted digital agency, Melbourne SEO and Video. He's an Amazon bestseller, lover of process and procedures, and founder of systemHub software. Recognizes his achievements through entrepreneurialism. Dave's keynote presentations can be found on YouTube, TEDx, WordCamp, and Problogger. Dave, mate, how you doing today?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having us.
Welcome, mate. I'm curious to know a bit more around where this entrepreneurial journey first started, selling Australia's Melbourne Cricket Ground. Tell me about that.
Yes, the MCG. That was my first big entrepreneurial break. I had just read a book called The 1 Minute Millionaire, and they were telling the story of Paul Hartunian, who sold the Brooklyn Bridge many, many years ago. They were doing some renovations. He got his hands on a whole bunch of discarded wood from the Brooklyn Bridge. He wrote a press release. This is back before the internet had really taken off. So he literally mailed out the press release to all of the different media outlets saying that a New Jersey man sells the Brooklyn Bridge for $24.95. And I just read this story, and then I was driving in my car past the MCG. And for those of you who are watching who aren't in Australia, it's sort of almost like a religious icon, because Australia, a lot of Australians worship sport, and that's like the home of sport in Australia. And I was driving past, and I realized they were knocking down the Ponsford stand. So it was almost like fireworks went off in my brain. I just read this book, and I drove past the MCG and thought, oh, I wonder what they're doing with all of the discarded rubble and things. So I went down to the wreckers, and at the time I thought, my first idea was I'm going to get bricks from the Melbourne Cricket Ground and mail out bricks. So I don't know what I was thinking back then. Obviously, postage would have absolutely killed me. But I went down to the wreckers, and the guy said, yes, we've got the bricks, but maybe you should go have a look at all of this wooden carpet. So I ended up getting discarded. There were green wooden benches that were very well sort of known and iconic to the MCG back in the day before they replaced them all to these plastic seats. And I just got my hands on piles of that wood, and they had this special carpet with the MCC crested logo on it. And I loaded up my dad's car with as much as I could get my hands on, took it back home, wrote out a press release, very similar, just modeling Paul Hartunian, and sent it out, and said that a Melbourne man sold the MCG for $24.95, and took little pieces of the wood and chopped them up into little thin slithers of MCG wood, and went to Officeworks and got myself some certificate paper and stuck these little pieces of wood to the certificate paper, and then sent out the press release. And for a little while there, I was the man of the moment. I got on TV and on radio and in a couple of newspapers, and just sold an absolute truckload of little pieces of the MCG. And that was kind of one of my first big breaks, I suppose, that really got me started.
Wow. I love that story, because there's so much that we can take from that. Number one is just the boldness and willingness to go and try something different. Two is obviously the ability just to take fast action and just to implement on something that had worked before, and as you shared, model that. What sort of money did you turn over, and how long ago was that?
I was 21. So we're talking, what's that, about 17 years ago now. And back in the day, look, I need to probably double check. It was probably somewhere close to, I think, a bit under six figures, I'd probably say. Like, it was, for me just getting started, like out of school, it was a great sort of starting ground. I learned a lot of things from it too, though. It really was a promotion, and I just sold a whole bunch of stuff on the front end. I didn't really have any back end.
No high ticket sales.
No high ticket sales. I tried, I got clued on, maybe a year or two into it, because I then had this database of all these people who've purchased a $24.95 little piece of memorabilia. And I had the MCC crested carpet, which I then got framed and sold for bigger pieces for $1,000. And then I did try and go back to that database to mail, and we sold a few. But I picked up a few valuable lessons from that little entrepreneurial thing. Like you said, got to move quick, and got to have a business off the back end of it as well. Like it's one thing to get a lot of leads and customers through and make a bit of money at the front, but that takes a lot of work and effort. Really, to get the most out of it, you then want to have the business on the back end, which can then keep selling to those people as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that strategy today hasn't changed. You look at a lot of people, like ClickFunnels is a perfect example, like speaking to Russell Brunson the other day. And, those guys built to $100 million in turnover in 3 years from inception. And, they get a lot of people approach them to offer them money, VC. And they always laugh because they have these VC guys going, well, look, how much does it cost you to sell a ClickFunnels membership? Like, how much does it cost you to generate a lead? They're like, about $120 or something. They're like, well, this is fantastic. Like, if we give you guys 50 million, like that's huge amount of growth we can get. He's like, yeah, but that's not the best part. He said, the actual fact is we get paid to generate leads now, because they have pretty much what you're talking about, which is an acquisition funnel. They have specifically a number of funnels out there that their core role is to basically mitigate lead costs. Their core role is to generate leads for $0, or in his case, they actually make $14 for every lead they generate through different funnels like free plus shipping and things like that, where they send out something of value. And then obviously their upsell is their core program. But he's not a best-selling author. He's not an author. They don't sell books. They sell ClickFunnels memberships, but books and things like that are the way that they actually pay for their lead costs. So what a great lesson to have learned like 17, 18 odd years ago.
Yeah, it was definitely sort of set me up and set me on a path that I've not really sort of ever waned from. I've always been stuck on this entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's look about that, like being the comeback game podcast, is that, something that I've found over the years is I've never met a business owner that's not going through some form of challenges. Like, it doesn't matter where they are in their journey. It doesn't matter how much money they make. It doesn't matter how many staff they have. It doesn't matter how long they've been doing this for, nor does it matter how many coaches and mentors they've had or have. The challenges continue, and they typically get bigger the more successful you become. And in that journey, we actually learn to become a better version of ourselves. And so, I'm wondering, looking back over the last, near 20 years of your entrepreneurial journey, like, what has been the biggest challenge or adversity that you've had to that you've faced?
The biggest one would be a friend and I. We ended up opening a rock and roll clothing music store called Planet 13, and our goal was to almost, I don't know if you're familiar with the store Off Your Tree. Yeah. It was a parent-friendly Off Your Tree that we were building, because we didn't want to sell drug-related paraphernalia or shirts with swear words all over them. We wanted something that would be really acceptable inside a shopping centre.
Yeah.
So we sort of started down that path, and doing retail is tough. Like, we had physical stores. We got it up to 3 stores, one of which we franchised, 2 were head office owned. We had sort of a staff of, I think it was a little over 30. And there's just a lot of moving parts. And with physical locations as well, each month you start, pretty far in the red, and you have to sell a lot just to get to break even. And you're working with shopping centers who get you to sign these, 5-year leases that are very much stacked in their favor with the clauses and things like that. And we got caught up in the GFC. We'd had these few stores going, and we were working in the stores, but then things got really, really tough. And going through that journey, I kind of learned a lot about, we'd spread ourselves really thin, and we had quite a few different things going, trying to do wholesale and manufacturing, and then we had the retail stores, and then we were trying to do online, and we did so many different things that because we were stretched so thinly, then things sort of started to crumble and we started to have some issues. And it's one thing as well when we had a store that when we ran it to a certain standard, but when we started franchising it and then we recruited franchisees and then got them into the store as well, they, as much as I thought they were going to be entrepreneurial business owners, they didn't have the passion like we did or the deep understanding. And I think when they were purchasing a franchise business, they really just wanted everything really done for them. And there was a lot of lessons that kind of we went through that and a lot of tough decisions that needed to be made. I'm not too sure where or how deep to go into that, but that was, definitely a long journey where I learned a lot.
Yeah. And probably a journey that's got you to where you are now, which we will come back to in a moment. I suppose before we do, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper because I think that there's, first of all, like a bunch of lessons that you probably learned that are still relevant today and to a lot of business owners out there. Like there's a few that I've already heard you share that I know are a massive issue. One being the amount that you guys are trying to do. Two being the fact that you stretch yourself too thin. Like typically as entrepreneurs, we push the envelope. So, we try to potentially always spend more than we make. We try to invest more than we save. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. Like where did you guys find yourself in that journey? Like what was the tipping point of that story for you guys? Like where did it get to? Because obviously that store doesn't exist today, or not as far as I know.
Yes, yeah. There, like all in the lead up, there are a few things. Like each time we saw an opportunity and we thought we should take advantage of that opportunity, whether that was getting someone to run in a store or negotiating a new lease or finding a new manufacturer offshore that was manufacturing belts from one of our competitors. Like these things would present to us and we just go, oh yeah, we should do that. So we just kept on taking one after the other. And that's kind of really got us to that stretching point or breaking point. And then I think at the time we were just putting in lots of hours. The solution to any of the problem was, we can just kind of work through it and grind through it.
Yeah.
And then that will get you so far. But we'd had a lot of commitments and obligations, when you start locking into leases and having wages and team members and people that rely on you and those sorts of things. I don't know if there was any one particular thing that happened. I just remember when we launched, we had all of this momentum and the excitement around the launch of the store, and the kids were loving it and parents hadn't seen anything like this, and we had them all coming into the store. As the business sort of started to mature, you had a few people that really kind of were in the scene and loved us and stuck with it all the way, but then the others that sort of came and went. And then when the GFC hit, a lot of what we had, it was kind of, I suppose, like it was not a required purchase. It's
nice twos, not have twos.
Yeah. So then with some of the kids and sort of stuff like that, we'd sort of started to wean off. But then, we did some smart things. We really identified the bits that were working well and then started doubling down on those. So the website, this is sort of like early days e-commerce, kind of going back over 10 years ago now, and I had some expertise in SEO. So we were heavily optimizing and we were early to the game with all of the e-commerce stuff that we were doing and getting some great organic rankings and things like that. So we really invested heavily into that. Then we ended up selling one of the stores. So one of the exits we did well because we had sold out, but then one of the other ones we kind of held on to a little bit too long. And I had other businesses that were starting to take off, and that's also became tough as well. It's kind of like that was a baby, but that I didn't want to let go of that business, but I knew I had this other business that was starting to grow and had to make some tough decisions there as well, because I didn't want the old business to really be holding back the success of the new business as it started to grow.
Yeah. What do you think, like if you were to summarize, like what do you think the three biggest learnings out of that journey or that experience have been that you've brought into obviously your businesses today?
Three biggest ones. The focus obviously is the one that we touched on early. I think that's critical. You've got to make sure that you figure out what your main thing is or the core thing and just get incredibly good at that and making it happen and delivered without you, the business owner. So that way, regardless of what happens, you've still got some cash flow engine that can keep powering the business. The other thing is really understanding the numbers and having a pulse on the business. Like we had some spreadsheets and we were able to see things and forecast as they were happening. And I think that was huge for us. And I can see that a lot of business owners miss that, but having some form of dashboard, collecting some sort of numbers and doing it consistently. So that way, when things start to fall out early, you can kind of spot them.
Yeah.
The other thing, I got a real appreciation for the systems and processes side of things when we went down the franchising path. And I learned a few things around that. I mean, sometimes just having step-by-step processes and procedures is not enough. Like you also then need to get the team to follow it. And you need to create a culture around systems and processes and get buy-in. And that's just the way that we do things. It's not just enough to have a manual. And I think that's given me more of an appreciation for the culture in business as well. There's a few things I used to not give much more than lip service to, thinking about, setting the dream or the mission or, what are the values and the culture. Like I used to just think, oh yeah, that's just, you read it in a business book and it sounds a little bit airy fairy. But now I'm starting to realize at the crux of it, that's what it's all about. You get very clear on the problem and who you're trying to serve and what it is that you're really trying to achieve from a big aspirational point of view. Then you think about how are we going to achieve that and breaking that down into some sort of mission, and then also having some values that circle around that, around what things do you stand for, what do you believe in, and what don't you? And then that becomes the guiding force. And then it also helps with stuff like the focus that I was talking about. Like if you know the problem that you're here to solve, you just keep coming back and you refresh your mind and remember what you're working on, so that if some opportunity pops up or a good idea or something like that, you run it through that filter. Well, is that getting us closer to achieving that? And I keep on looking off to the left because, you literally get it, you print it out, and then you stick it, you have it sitting next to the monitor. So it just reminds you what you're here to do when it comes to building your business.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, because I know so many business owners that are either in business because they bucked the system. They got jack of employment or working for the man, that they decided that they could do it better, would do it better. There's another bunch of people that are kind of like what I call accidental business owners. It's like they somehow fell into business and this thing has just taken off and turned into a beast, and they're $1 million or a couple $1 million down the road, don't kind of know how they got there, like seemingly like accidental. And then there's your other ones that purposely kind of wake up one day and go, you know what, I'm going to change the world. You know what, I'm going to create something, or I'm going to fix a problem that's not mine to fix. And they're that way inclined. And I think what I find is interesting is you talk about, vision, mission, values, culture, systems and processes. And as entrepreneurs, often you see this drive. They just want to do the doing. They just want to go out there and hustle. They just want to go out there and make the sales, show the leads, make the sales, even fill in the order. And that there's sometimes not a lot of foresight into creating, what I'd call is the environment, the energetic and the physical environment that you want your business to operate on. Understanding specifically, like, where is it we are today? Like, where is it as a person, as a company, as a business are we today? And where is it we want to go? Like, what's the North Star? And how do we get there? And it's that whole saying of the 6 Ps, that proper planning prevents piss poor performance. And I think that as business owners, the more that we stop and plan and strategize, like, how can we create something that is repeatable? how can we create something that delivers consistency to the marketplace? Because ultimately when people are buying, they're buying certainty. They're buying like, what problem does this widget solve? And am I certain that I can trust you or trust it to deliver on that? And you touch on systems, and this is like one of my favorite topics, and something that, for me, I bucked for years. Like, I knew for so long, I'd done all the research, all the reading, all the education, that systems would set me free. And even though I knew it, I still didn't do it. I still didn't set them up. I didn't put the time in because, I don't know, like, it was detailed. It was boring. It wasn't out there client facing. It wasn't getting me in front of the customer. It wasn't fun and exciting. Yet, you know as well as I do, the beauty that systems have for a business owner, and the freedom that can help them to achieve. And so I suppose I want to change gears now to talk a little bit around one of your more recent ventures, and something that if you look back, I think your entrepreneur journey has kind of led to where you are today, and I'm sure you'll agree on that as well. Let's chat about what you guys do at the moment around systemHub.
Yeah, so it's funny, each business, and you mentioned those different types of business owners and how and why they start and how they fall into business. I feel like I've been that person at different points throughout each different business. And you kind of learn and pick up things. And now with the business that I'm working in at the moment, that's really been the one where I've been most intentional. All the ones up to that, I've kind of just fallen into it. I've just kind of evolved, and it just sort of happened. Whereas this one, I've got to a point now where I see which are the important pieces. I thought about it up front. I thought about what the business is here to do, and then been much more strategic in its growth. So we've got two parts to the business now. There's systemHub, which is a platform that houses businesses' standard operating procedures in the cloud. But more than that, I mean, the importance of what we're trying to do is really free businesses and business owners from the day-to-day operations, because business owners get caught up in the trap of the doing, and that's not necessarily the best use of their time. So we try and think about how to remove them. That's become my passion, because the other business, like probably a lot of entrepreneurial business owners, I've had lots of different businesses that I've been involved in. I have another business that was just before systemHub that really generated a lot of these ideas, which is a digital agency called Melbourne SEO Services. And I got stuck in that business for about 10 years. And I was working on the tools, and just very much the center cog in this machine. And then we got to a point towards the end of it, found out we were pregnant. I got married, and I thought, hey, I've got to have a change. So I had this point of decision where I thought, I don't want to be working 60, 70-hour work weeks. I want to create a business that supports the lifestyle a little bit more. And not that I wanted to just sit and lie on a beach somewhere, but I wanted the freedom when I did want to go on a holiday, that I could be in holiday mode. I think a lot of business owners they don't get that freedom to be able to disconnect. And I spent a good sort of amount of time systemizing that business towards the end of my time working in it. And then I hired a CEO, and she now runs the day-to-day operations of that. Then, we ended up having 2 kids, took a little bit of time out, and had some chance to think and decide, well, what am I here to do? And then that's really what kind of got me to come back and say, I want to show other business owners how to do just the systems component. That's the bit that we do really, really well. What is the system for systemizing the business? And systemHub is the software to do that. But then we also have the thinking as well, which we call systemology. And that's the step-by-step process on how is it done. Because you mentioned something earlier about not being a systems thinker or more so resisting it for a while. That's very common, and it's a blind spot for most business owners. They have a blind spot towards systems and processes because they're usually big picture thinkers. They're usually very creative. They're very quick start, like they're able to get things up and running, moving quickly, and they'll just figure things out, and they always land on their feet, which almost seems the antithesis of a systemized, measured, structured approach, consistency. And that's a lot of the reasons why it becomes a blind spot for business owners. But it's also ends up being, it's the trap. It's what ends up handcuffing them to the business. And it's great you need all of those skills to grow to one size, but then all of those skills of wanting to micromanage and being across everything and needing to feel like you're involved in the process ends up being what holds them back moving through to that next level. So we've tried to break some of those beliefs, and that's what systemology is about. It's what are some of those false beliefs that the business owner has, that maybe they need to create the systems, or that creating systems is going to remove creativity, or that systems, even if they had them in place, their team wouldn't follow them anyway. Like, there are a lot of these myths that people come up with around systemization, and we've tried to engineer a process that shows them, hang on, there's actually another way to approach these systems, and it can help you kind of break through to that next level. And it's really an interesting one, right? When we look at systems, they have the ability to set us free. And for me, I feel it's the difference of us as business owners operating a slot machine versus an ATM, is that so many and a lot of business owners are operating a slot machine. They're putting money in the top, they're pulling the handle down, and they're hoping that the numbers turn up so they get a payout. And the reality is that this is why only 4% of businesses make it. 4% of businesses succeed, right? So out of 100 businesses, we're talking 4 make it past the million, 1.5 mark, make it to a position where they're actually growing and generate business. And you actually have better odds going to the casino and putting your money on black than you do starting and growing a business. Yet I feel that systems have the ability to move us from being, running a slot machine to running an ATM, that providing you've made deposits into your bank account, if you go there with a card and you put it in and you select the right account and you put the right PIN number in, you've got the ability to withdraw cash. And that's what I really see that systems and processes allow us to do as business owners, is allow us to in some degree, generate consistency in our resource management, our time and our staff, and generate consistency in terms of our growth, our profitability and revenue generation. Yeah, a lot of it has to do with systems is just about replication of what works. That's why when I'm working with business owners, I like them to have a few things in place before they start systemizing. To really get the most from systemization, you want to already be clear on who your target audience is. You want to know the problem that you're solving for them. You already want to have a product or service that helps to solve that problem. You want to have gone to market and sold it and got good feedback from selling that. And, maybe you have some testimonials and those sorts of things. So you've already started ticking these boxes to know, well, I've actually got something here. I've got the proof that this is actually going to work. And then systemization really is about then, well, how do we scale that? How do we capture what's happening and then make sure that what's happening can be delivered without the business owner? Otherwise, the business owner very quickly becomes the bottleneck. And it really is, first of all, just capturing what you're doing. A lot of people, they'll try and make the systems just right or perfect when they launch, when you're much better off just capturing what you're doing, warts and all, even if it's not quite right, just shining the light and putting some attention on, well, what are we doing, and thinking about it, you will see some improvements, but don't necessarily obsess over it, trying to make it like a McDonald's standard A grade type system. Like, they've been systemizing for 60 years. You've just started systemizing. So let's just get you to at least get some consistency, even if it's not even 100% just yet.
Yeah. So give us your top three tips. So people that are watching or listening to this today going, yeah, it's all well and good, but I ran off my feet. I haven't got time for this. I'm struggling to keep my head above water. What are your top 3 tips to help them to start to transition from that to getting their time back when it comes to systems?
Yep. So top 3, one first is around the focus that we talked about. So it would be select one product or service that is a great gateway to your product line or to your business. What is that central product or service that you sell? That could be a great place to start, because you don't want to try and systemize everything, just figure out one. And then we have a thing we call the critical client flow. It's about mapping the customer journey. Just think about, how do you get leads? How do you convert these leads? How do you invoice them, onboard them, deliver that one product or service? And then how do you get them to come back? Literally map it out. There's probably 10, 15 systems in that, and start really high level about starting to bullet point about what's included. So that's probably step one, is to get some sort of focus. Then step number two, once you know those high level points, then think about, well, who in your team has some of that knowledge? So who knows how to invoice? You probably know how to invoice through Xero, but maybe you've got a bookkeeper or an accounts lady. Well, make it her responsibility to be able to extract or capture what it is that she's doing from her brain. Wherever you can, we need to break that habit of the business owner thinking that they need to be the person that solves and does everything. And then once you've identified who has that knowledge, the final thing is, or the third step I'll mention, is then around the extraction. And a big breakthrough that I had is this understanding, when you're systemizing, it's a two-person job. You've got the person who has the knowledge, and then you have the person who does the documentation. Most people don't like doing documentation. Even if you go to your team and say, look, I listened to Dave and Barry and I'm all excited by systemization and I want you to start documenting all of these processes, most of your staff don't have the time, just like you, and they might not even be detail orientated and enjoy doing that documentation. So they'll never actually get around to it. But if you can make it easy for them with a screen recording software, or record them doing the task and then their job is done, then you take that video and it goes to someone else who watches it and does the documentation. Then it goes back to the knowledgeable worker who can then edit, because a lot of people, prefer to edit. They just don't like working from a blank screen. So those three steps, the getting very focused, thinking about who has the knowledge, not the business owner, and then getting someone else to do the documentation, that will at least get you started. And just focus on just those 10 to 15 systems. Don't go down any rabbit holes just yet. There's probably hundreds of things you could document, but let's just focus on these 10 to 15.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing too is to realize that it's a marathon, not a sprint. You mentioned McDonald's has been systemizing for many, many years, and that was something I know in the very, very beginning overwhelmed me, and possibly yourself as well, is the feeling that I've got to go through and create systems for the whole entire business. And I remember the very first system that I created was a system for writing systems. And it was one how-to sheet that allowed my team and our clients to systemize their business from that very first step is the system for writing systems. And I think the most important thing, like running a marathon, is just to start with the training, start with creating your first process, your critical client flow, like you've mentioned, creating your first system for that, and see this as a journey over the next 12 months to 2 years, rather than something that you need to go and do this weekend because you're all pumped up and inspired by setting yourself free through systems now. I think is an important one. And probably too, like if you guys watching or listening to this, what the system for writing systems, just comment below, say systems, and Dave and I could probably certainly hook you up with that document as well. Dave, like any further comments to kind of finish off this? Then I got one, two questions I want to ask you before we wrap up today.
Yeah. Look, the main thing is that you really need to make this just part of the way that you do business. It needs to be part of the culture within the organization that you are systems thinkers. You have systems and process. And if someone has a problem or a question that they want to get solved, the first thing that they need to do is go to your systemHub account or go to wherever you're saving your systems and your processes and look for the solution there first. If you can't find it there, then you go to the knowledgeable person to ask them, and then they might be able to create it, or they can show you where it is and point you in the right direction. And then get the culture of, if people start following systems and processes and a mistake happens, it's never the fault of the individual. First, always go to the system first and say, was it a fault of the system? Was it missing a step? Was something not quite clear? How can we improve that? And that encourages people. Then you're kind of making it okay and safe for making mistakes, as long as you capture that, and then it helps to improve the system, and you create a feedback loop so the systems get better. Because as Barry said, this is a marathon, and really this is a marathon that never ends. Even with systemization, like, you will just keep improving and getting better, and you'll find the smaller problems start to reduce. Like, at the moment now, business owners, they constantly feel like they're putting out fires and they've got all of these little problems. You'll actually start to realize, as you systemize, the quality of the problems start to get better. As in, you're not solving down at the weeds level of, oh, this person forgot to invoice our client and now we're chasing them up in 3 months' time saying, hey, we've been working with you for 3 months and we forgot to invoice you. Those sorts of problems start to reside, and then you start to focus on bigger, better quality problems that really, that's what the business owner does. It's the business owner, their whole game when it comes to growing business is a problem solver. They are the chief problem solver. So we just need to make sure that we get you as the business owner really good at solving problems once, and then that then becomes internalized and part of the business. It's just wasted energy if the business owner is solving the same problems over and over and over again. That's what systems are about. Find the problem, find the system solution, install that into the business, work on it, iterate on it, get someone else to be able to follow it. And then that lets the business owner keep leveling up, and everything starts to level up with it. Yeah.
I love what you share there, because it becomes less personal. Like, if staff make mistakes, which they inherently do, like that's just part of being human. Like us as business owners, we make mistakes as well. And yet, when there's a basic system in place, we could, and there's mistakes made, we can first and foremost go back to the system and go, okay, cool. Was the system followed? Yes, correct. Where in the system was there the shortfall? Where did something fall down? Where did something get overlooked or not seen or not understood? And make that change. And like you said, iterate that. And it becomes a lot less personal. It actually allows your culture to grow as well in your organization, because people feel safe doing their jobs. They feel safe making mistakes, knowing that there is a process for improvement, continued improvement within the organization. So I love that. And Dave, obviously Systems Hub is your systems baby you've been working on, is the software platform that holds everything together. The software platform where all those systems and processes and the training and procedures and things are stored together to make it nice and easy for the business owner to use.
So it's where all the how-tos go. And I mean, when you're just getting started out, if you're super micro, you're probably better off having a look at something like Dropbox and saving them in Word docs, or maybe you try and do something with Google Drive. As long as you just get started, System Hub's probably better once you're a little bit further down the journey and you're kind of ready to have everything centrally located and have a bit more control over permissions and setting up different departments, so you can assign systems based on, oh, you're a marketing person. Okay, well, here are all of the marketing systems. One thing that popped into my mind, I did want to give one other tip as well, was around finding your Anna or finding your Melissa. Like, as the business owner, as I said earlier, oftentimes you'll have a blind spot to the systems side of things. And there might even be some level of resistance. If that's the case, then try and see if you can find someone who complements you. I know when Barry first reached out and we were talking about System Hub, I actually spent probably more time chatting with Anna than I did with Barry, because she was more the operations person and the systems person. And I've got Melissa, who runs our digital agency. You want to find someone who already has a systems mindset and process driven, and see if you can bring them into the organization as well. So that way they can become your systems champion and drive it forward, because it's something that needs to be constantly resurfaced, constantly put into the minds of the team members that, we always look for the systems solution. And it takes work and effort to do that. And if it's not you, then find someone else who can help you do it.
Yeah, I love that. And that's probably a key learning I think a lot of people get from this process is it doesn't actually have to be you as a business owner. This whole journey starts with you being able to relinquish control and have other people step in and start to build it. Like you build the infrastructure, you build the framework, but have them fill it in. I think is an important step. And, one thing to add too, Dave, that we haven't spoken about, I just probably want to touch base, and it's a much longer conversation. I think for me, I've seen probably almost the biggest journey that a business owner takes in this process is actually within themselves. Typically, business owners in the beginning, they're very good at getting things done. They're very good at overseeing things. And from what I've noticed, and through the hundreds of clients that I've personally worked with, I think the biggest journey of them stepping out of the business is more of a mindset, more of an internal game than external. They could have the systems and processes set up, but if they're not willing to let go of control, if they're not willing to actually step back and to move into that realm of leadership, like I know Michael Gerber talks about the 4 stages of growth. It's like you have a really good technician, which all business owners typically start as a technician. And they move from technician to manager where they're starting to have other technicians in that are doing the job or the role. And one of the hardest jumps that I've seen a lot of people make is manager to leader, which is, okay, now I'm stepping out of doing the doing and I'm now starting to, as a leader, I'm starting to build other leaders in the organization. And obviously from leader, we move to entrepreneur where we have, leader entrepreneurs where we have this system set up, this business system set up, this ATM set up where we're getting repeatable and replicable results. And it's not us physically doing the do. And yet I see internally there's a mindset shift that has to happen in business owners to be able to step back enough to allow that to happen. Otherwise, even with the systems in place, they create sabotage as well. Have you seen that too?
Yeah, it's all too often. I think a real key to try and break those habits is to try and set up positive constraints, things that force you to take the right action. An example sometimes I use, I remember that I had a friend who just started being an entrepreneur. He left his 9 to 5, started working from home, found he had real trouble getting out of bed each morning, because he had no one looking over his shoulder and there was no time pressure there. So he started sleeping in, and then he came up with this idea of parking his car, because out the front of his house on the main street was a clearway. So he would park his car out the front of his house because he knew that he had to move his car every morning at 7 a.m. Otherwise, they were going to tow the car because it was a clear way for where all the traffic came through. And he set this positive constraint for himself that forced him to take the action. And I find that with systems and processes, once you figure out, and I mean, if you're watching this far in, you've already had the insight, and all business owners know at some level that systems and processes are a key part of growing their business. Like I've never had a discussion with a business owner who says, no, that's rubbish. Systems and processes, whether they think it's now or they think it's a little bit further down the line, they already recognize that it's important. So you have to figure out what are the ways to create the positive constraints that force the right result, whether that's getting a coach, whether that's getting a team member internally that pushes some of that sort of, now you've got to show up because you've made a commitment to someone. Maybe you buy a course, maybe you purchase something, try and throw your hat over the fence on a few things that then force the action to happen. Otherwise you'll just, look for reasons why you should do it later.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. The parking the car in the clear way. And, one thing that we've used before is obviously when a business owner gets to a position where they have some of these systems and processes in place is get them to take a 2-week or a 1-month long holiday and see what breaks. Come back and see what breaks and see where those improvements need to be, because there's been so many times that we've had business owners step back, have a holiday, and they've come back and they're like, oh my God, the thing's operating without me. It's like sometimes we get so stuck in believing that we're the only person that can do this thing or operate this thing or know what's going on. We don't actually allow the support and our team members around us to step up and take control. So I love that tip, Dave. Like set up that positive constraint that in some way forces you or puts you into that checkmate position to have to do something different.
Yeah, holidays are definitely one of the best ones to do that with, because it kind of helps the business owner get that perspective as well that they all too often don't get because they're working in it. Then you start to see once you step back, you start to see yourself and your business really as a collection of systems. And then a lot of the problems that you're having inside your business and your life in general are related to systems. Like when I think of a system is just a series of steps that when followed create a consistent outcome.
Yeah.
So if you're having problems in the business, you can always come back to, at the systems level, what are the steps that are taking that are causing this problem? And that going away on a holiday gives you a chance to get that outside perspective.
Yeah, so true. Dave, mate, it's been an incredible conversation. I trust that the people watching or listening to this today, wherever they are, have got an immense amount of value. If they want to find you, systemshub.com?
Yes, systemhub.com. So singular. Yeah, .com. And then we can pop a link or something like that in the show notes or underneath the video.
Totally. And look, if you're watching this and you've got a business that's a little bit out of control right now, and you want to have a chat with myself or Dave around some of the things we can help you guys put in place to get some consistent results, get your time back. We'll put a link below to book a scale session and have a conversation around how we can make that happen as well. Mate, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate all that you've shared. And if you guys loved this episode or got something out of it, let us know below, because it will allow us to obviously invite Dave back and go a little bit deeper on his knowledge. We've just barely even scratched the surface of Dave's knowledge around systems, processes, and how to create a business and a life that somewhat works without you.
Perfect. Thanks, Barry.
Thanks for your time, mate.